Okay, so we will quickly go to these topics. In today's class, we will be basically discussing about IR spectroscopy and a bit of fluorescence spectroscopy. Fluorescence spectroscopy is kind of a little bit simpler compared to this IR and UV visible spectroscopy because it's kind of a very uh, direct, straightforward kind of a technique. At some point of time, we can dedicate one class to understand the instrumentation of all these different instruments, where we can see in detail about the source, the different monochromators they are using, and eventually the detectors, which are the important part of these instruments. Okay, I think everyone might have gone through the syllabus for this particular course. We do have kind of a three different topics. One is the spectroscopy, and second one is the chromatography, and third is the microscopy. Of course, it is not. I don't know why it is only the three topics have been given, but we can take it. We can also cover a couple of more topics if time permits. Like I would love to cover a bit of centrifuge, ultra centrifuge at the end of the session. If we have enough time, we will cover that. Okay, and another couple of topics which are related to this biotechnology field, we will see at the end of this semester if time permits. Okay, so for the mid-sem examination, we have a topic of spectroscopy. In the spectroscopy, what we can do is that we can leave out a couple of topics such as NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, and mass spectroscopy, and X-ray
To interrupt
crystallography.
you, but your voice is breaking, sir.
Okay, okay, just 1 minute. Hello, is it audible? Is it clear now?
Yes, sir.
Hello, hello.
Yes, sir.
Sir, you are audible.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I'm sorry about this actually. Because this weekend and most of the time the internet and electricity is a real pain actually. So anyway, I was telling about this midterm exams. So most probably we'll be having a minor exam next week. Okay, so the plan is let us finish spectroscopy. Okay, and the two topics I'm keeping it for the after midsem. That will be the NMR, because these are going to be the major topics which using which we can decode the three-dimensional structure of the biomolecules. So I just want to cover it in a little bit more detail. Actually, I'll try to cover X-ray crystallography before midsem examination, or else we can keep X-ray, NMR, and mass spectrometry after the midsem. Okay, so the idea is let us cover the other topics left out in the spectroscopy. Let us cover the spectroscopy completely, and we will try to cover the chromatography before the October 15. Actually, I think that is October 15 is the midsem kind of starting off, right? I think it's on from October 12. Okay. So the idea is by October 9, we have to cover at least the chromatography techniques and the spectroscopy without the three topics. Okay. And after the midsem, we will be talking about this microscopy and the other three topics like NMR and mass spectrometry. Okay, and I would love to devote one class for studying for discussing the instrumentation for all these methods actually, because you are doing a BTech in biotechnology, and you are supposed to know how these instruments behave. So we will see in more detail about the different source, the monochromators we are using, and the different detectors. Detectors are very interesting and very important part of these instruments. Okay, so one class, 1 to 2 class, we can devote for this instruments and all these things. Okay, so anyway, so any questions are there? So type of questions for exams, I am not very keen in asking the textbook kind of questions, because obviously you will refer the textbooks and write. So some can be a little bit of theoretical questions. Little bit it will be like 1 or 2 questions will be theoretical, and other questions, the other rest of the questions will be more like problematic, or like couple of problems which we discussed in the last class. Okay, and couple of derivations will be also there actually. How to derive Beer-Lambert's law and all those things. Fine. So, okay. So let us go to the topic for today's session. That will be briefly about IR spectroscopy. In the last class, we were just 1 minute. Okay, so in the last class, we were discussing about the UV visible spectroscopy in more detail. Okay, and of course, the energy for UV visible spectroscopy is quite higher compared to the IR spectroscopy. And IR spectroscopy is, as you might be already knowing, it denotes the molecular vibration. In the case of UV visible spectroscopy, the energy is such. 1 minute. Okay. Yeah, in the case of IR spectroscopy, basically the energy is of the energy is of the order that it does induce a little bit of molecular vibration in the molecules. That's it. But in the case of UV visible, it induces the excitation of the electrons from the orbitals. Okay. In the case of X-rays, the energy is of such an order that it induces excitation as well as the exit of the electrons from the molecular orbitals. Of course, gamma rays, that's why these gamma rays, X-rays and UV rays are harmful to the human beings. Okay, but another thing which I want to mention here is that we make use of radio waves in the when we are trying to understand the three-dimensional structure of the protein molecules or DNA nucleotides, anything like that in NMR. Okay, we will be talking about this thing in the later section of the talk. Not today. Okay, so this is a basic the spectra for a molecule. It's an example of 1,3-butane diene. Okay, this is basically, it shows the lambda max which you obtain
Your screen is not visible.
On the screen is
You
not
haven't-
visible.
You haven't turned on share screen.
Okay, just 1 minute. Is it visible now? Is it clear? Not
No,
yet.
sir.
No, no.
Okay, why is it like that? Oh, okay, I didn't share anything, right? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I was sharing something. Okay. I hope that by November the college starts off and we will be having a kind of a physical class rather than juggling around these tabs and different instruments. Okay, yeah. So this is what I was really talking about, this UV visible spectroscopy and IR spectroscopy. Fine. Okay. So what exactly is it clear now? Is it visible? I think so. Yeah, it's visible. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So what exactly you can see in the screen right now is basically a spectra for 1,3-butadiene. It's basically a UV visible spectra for this particular molecule actually, and it does has a lambda max at 240 nanometers. So one thing you might have observed actually in this particular kind of a UV visible spectra, that there is a kind of a broadening of the peaks actually. So it is very much prominent here. The same is true when you are doing it for the different biomolecules. Okay, but the same is not true actually when you are doing a UV visible spectra for a particular atom. Okay, this one is an example for a sodium. In the case of a sodium or different atoms, what exactly you can see here, you get a kind of a clear peaks actually, not like the one you get it for a molecule. The one reason for this is not only these molecules, they have kind of electronic energy levels. They also have another energy levels which goes by the name of vibrational energy levels. Okay, so what what exactly you can see on the screen is basically a stadium. So what I'm trying to trying to correlate this series of stacks with HOMO and LUMO, actually the one I was talking about in the last session. Okay, if you consider this as a ground state, okay, and this one as the exciter non-bonding orbitals, exciter states having a different energy levels, a molecule, a electron can jump from the ground state to the exciter state, right? But of course you know that for jumping from the ground state to the this region, it requires huge amount of energy. Okay, at the same time what happens is that there is a kind of a different series of vibration energy. For example, just imagine that you are sitting here in this stadium. If you want to, hypothetically, let us assume that you want to jump from here to here, the amount of energy required by you for jumping from here to here will be very high compared with the shifting of seats in the rows. Actually, if you want to shift a seat from here to here, the amount of energy required will be very less, and you can easily shift and juggle around the rows. Okay, and the same thing happens in the molecule. Okay, so the take home message is that in the case of molecules, they have both this electronic and vibrational energy levels. Okay, the electronic the shift is much more complicated. It requires more amount of energy, but the vibration energy require a little bit of energy, and the molecules are always in constant motion. Okay, fine. So if you give this the ground level, the row 1 to the lower deck here, if we give it a kind of energy difference at delta E1, and the same way if you give the series of rows at delta E2, 3, 4, the amount of energy required will be increasing exponentially. Okay, so this is one of the major reason why we get a kind of a broad peak uh, when we get a spectra for a UV visible spectrophotometer for a biomolecule. Okay, if it's not clear, let me put it in this way. The molecules have both electronic as well as excitation as well as the vibration energy levels. Okay, and the molecule are not very clear. They keep on shifting, having this vibration energy levels. They are in constant motion. Because of this they can have a kind of a confused energy levels. Okay, so that's why the peak is not very clear. We get a kind of a broad peak. Okay, but this is not true for all the molecules. As you can see here, in the case of benzene, it does have a kind of clear short peaks we get actually. These particular peaks, they represent to the different vibrational energy levels for this molecule. Okay, so there are exceptions are always there. So you have to keep this all these parameters into consideration when you are trying to decode the spectra for this all the spectrophotometers. One important feature which I wanted to derive, but about this is the Frank Codon principle actually. And are you guys really aware of this Frank Codon principle? Have you come across this principle anytime?
No, sir.
No, okay, great. So I think Shreyas was asking one question actually. So this Frank Codon principle basically answers that particular question, what he was answering, what he was questioning. So I wanted to derive this thing, but it will take a little bit of more time to set up my web camera. So I will leave it as such for now. At the end of the talk, I will try to derive this Frank Codon principle. Okay. But But just keep it in mind that this basic principle, it describes the intensities of the vibronic transitions or absorptions or emission of a photon. Okay, it also states that when a molecule is undergoing an electronic transition, such as ionization, the nuclear configuration of the molecule experiences no significant change. So it means that although a molecule tends to vibrate, the nuclear configuration of the molecule doesn't undergo any kind of significant change. So, for example, I'll try to explain it here without using any pen and paper. So, for example, if you consider a molecule here, actually, let us give it a name A. A molecule A, it is bonded to a molecule B, and both these molecules A and B are vibrating like each other. Okay, as I was mentioning, it's a kind of a stretching vibration. They are vibrating like this, and the vibration, we can plot it actually. The vibration of the B, we can plot it as something like this actually. Uh, 1 minute. It's always better to explain it on pen and paper. Just give me a minute. Otherwise, I will just leave it for the time being. At the end of the talk, I will try to explain it in more detailed manner. Okay. So this is basically a dancing protein. It's basically kind of a transmembrane protein. As I was mentioning at the start of my talk, that all the molecules are always in a kind of a constant motion. So here you can see at the screen is a protein. The protein, this is actually the actual state of a protein inside your body. The protein is constantly it's dancing actually. You can see the tiny mini atoms and molecules are there in the constant vibration, constant motion. Okay, the same is obviously it's true for the molecules. If you can consider two molecules, the molecule A and B, they are in a constant vibration motion. It tends to generate heat. Okay, and when we say a covalent bond between these two atoms of the certain length, okay, we can call it as a bond length. We are citing an average because the bond behaves as if it is in a vibrating spring connecting the two atoms. Okay, so when you denote the bond length of two molecules,
You are not audible,
you give it approximate values because, okay, what is happening? What is happening? Hello? Hello? I'm not audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay. 1 minute. Okay. What I was mentioning was when you say bond length is a basic the distance between two molecules, two atoms actually. Okay. So if you consider this atom A and B, this yellow color, the spring like thing is called as the bond length. Okay, the bond length holds a kind of a significant place when you are trying to decode the structure of biomolecules. Okay, you can you could remember studying in the biochemistry the different bond lengths for the DNA, RNA, and the proteins. Okay, can anyone tell me what exactly is the bond length for hydrogen? What is the hydrogen bond length for an hydrogen?
I think 1.09, I guess.
Okay, so how do you specify? They are kind of a three different bond lengths. We call it as in terms of hydrogen. One is called as a weak hydrogen bond. Second is going to be the stronger one. Okay, so in the protein molecules, if the hydrogen bonding is in the order of around 2.4 to 3 angstrom, so we call it as kind of a moderate hydrogen bond, and that is hydrogen bond which is more or less prevalent in all the biomolecules, in all the protein molecules. Okay, so in the previous picture, you can see there are a lot of the proteins shaking. Okay, so it means that the hydrogen bonds are forming and breaking like considerably. They are forming and breaking at like in the nanosecond scale. So this is what exactly happens inside your body. Fine. So the IR spectroscopy makes use of this particular vibrational energies, because when the two molecules are there and they go a constant vibration, they tend to produce electromagnetic spectrum. Okay, as the both the molecules oscillate, they tend to produce electromagnetic spectrum. And if we give one external source, as here in the case, if we give an external IR beam from the spectrometer, and if the electromagnetic spectrum produced by the vibration of this molecule matches, then it will they tend to couple with each other and produce the kind of a constructive interference, and they produce the kind of a constructive interference that gives out the signal. Okay, if you can remember, in the previous lecture we were talking about the addition of the sine waves, addition of the cosine waves. So exactly that's what exactly it happens here. Okay, if the beam, the infrared rays coming from the spectrometer are in sync or in phase with the electromagnetic radiation generated by the vibration of the one molecule, then it tends to produce the constructive interference and produces a signal at the IR spectrophotometer. Okay, the opposite is also true. It means that this particular molecule is absorbing the IR beam, right? So that's why it is producing an amplified signal. And let us look at the different vibrational energies which we can find it in a molecule. The first one is basically is a symmetrical molecule. You can see that if you consider this as a carbon, the two hydrogen molecules undergo asymmetry, and they can also undergo a kind of asymmetrical molecule, asymmetrical vibration, sorry. And here it's basically is a kind of the bending vibration, where the two hydrogen move towards each other, and they can also follow a rocking or a twisting kind of a vibration. So all these different kind of vibrational energies, they can be observed in a molecule. The one thing in the IR spectroscopy is it basically it captures the vibration energy of the molecule. Okay, the vibration energies of the molecule is going to be very unique to the molecules. It is kind of very similar to your fingerprint. For example, every individual molecule has a kind of a unique vibrational frequency. Okay, it is going to be very unique as your fingerprint. It basically depends on the mass. Two factors. Okay, one is going to be the mass, the other one is the tension or the bond strength between the atoms. This is kind of a very obvious assumption. If we increase the mass, it reduces the frequency. Okay, the mass and the frequency are inversely proportional to each other. You can get a clear picture if you can picture yourself as taking two balls which are connected by a spring. Okay, and if you are increasing the mass of the balls, the vibration frequency of the spring, it tends to reduce. Okay, the same thing if we can play around by changing the mass of the balls, it will give you a clear picture that increasing the mass of an atom will decrease the frequency at which the bond vibrates. Okay, so the take home message is that the bulkier the atom is, the lower the frequency is. Okay, so all these factors you have to employ when you are trying to analyze the IR spectra. Right. The second thing, as I was mentioning, is the effect of the tension of the bond length. Okay, if you are increasing tension here, the tension denotes the number of bond it has. It has going to be like a single bond, or it is going to be a double bond or a triple bonded. Okay, if you are going to increase the tension, it increases the vibration frequency of the molecule. So they are going to be directly proportional to each other. The mass is inversely proportional to the frequency, and the tension of the molecule is directly proportional to the frequency. Okay. These are the basic insights about this IR spectroscopy. In the case of UV visible spectroscopy, we have seen that the photons are of the range between 200 to 700 nanometers, which undergo a kind of excitation from the ground state to the higher non-orbital states. Okay, and using UV visible spectroscopy, we can decode the molecular structures, such as we can understand how many pi bonds the molecule has, whether it has got any kind of a C double bond O, or whether the pi bond is conjugated or not. So this all information you can get it from the UV visible spectroscopy. In the case of vibrational spectroscopy, will give a kind of a direct indication of the functional groups which is present in the molecule. Okay, the vibrational energy is in the order in the wavelength between 2500 to 25000 nanometers. It corresponds to the mid IR region of the spectrum. Okay, this is going to be the basic idea for IR spectroscopy, where we measure a molecule, the molecule's vibration energy, which observes IR infrared light actually. So it gives us a clue about the nature of the bond the molecule has. Okay, so this is basically exposing the molecule to the IR light and getting a spectra. So if the molecule absorbs IR light, then it won't be giving a particular spectra at the given wavelength. So that is the overall picture about this IR spectroscopy. And this is again the same picture. I'm just rotating it again so that you can understand this IR spectroscopy. The range between it lies in the range between 2500 to 25,000. Okay, and the UV range is between 400. The UV visible range is between 200 to 700 nanometers, and this gives you the brighter picture that IR spectroscopy deals with the lower energy spectrum compared to the UV visible region. Okay, UV visible region, the energy levels are very high to excite the molecules, but in the case of IR spectra, the energy is not so high. It is just enough to vibrate the molecules. Okay, the IR spectroscopy, the plot is basically plotted between the transmittance versus the wave number. Okay, the wave number is nothing but the inverse of lambda actually. So it is basically the unit is like centimeter inverse. This is a new term which we had introduced for the sake of our own convenience, because it is much easy to directly relate the energy with the wave number, because just keep it in mind, the frequency is directly proportional to the energy. Okay, and the lambda is inversely proportional to the energy. So higher the energy, lower the lambda or the wavelength. So if we can give 1 by lambda is equal to wave number, then it will be kind of directly proportional to the energy, and it will be much easy for us to correlate the data. So that's why we have introduced a new term which goes by the name of wave number. Okay, the wave number is on the x-axis, and on the y-axis we have the value, or which is called as a transmittance. Okay, so if you could remember, in the case of UV visible spectroscopy, the y-axis was an absorbance. So this IR spectrum will be kind of an inverter of what exactly you saw at the UV visible spectrum. For example, in the case of this IR spectroscopy, this will be the baseline, and the peak will be something like this. Okay, it will be kind of a or we can call it as trough, pointing towards the bottom. So these are some of the definitions of transmittance and the wave number. Wave number, as I mentioned, it is the inverse of the wavelength. Okay, inverting the wavelength, it gives you the wave number, which the unit is like centimeter inverse. As I mentioned, it helps to correlate easily with the energy term. Okay, because it's going to be directly proportional to the energy. That's why we came up with this term. Okay, so what you are seeing in the screen is basically the IR spectra for a water molecule. Okay, so this will be this is the IR spectra for a water molecule. Okay, so hello, I think lost the connection. Am I
Yeah,
audible?
now you're audible. Now you're audible.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Yeah, as I was mentioning, the x-axis is the wave number. Okay, it starts from the low frequency and goes towards high frequency. Okay, so low frequency means the lower energy to the higher energy, and in the case of IR spectra, it's going to be completely inverted view of what you saw at the UV visible or other spectrophotometers output. Okay, so the peaks will be, these are the peaks here. So these are the peaks here, which means it is going to be a zero transmittance. The molecule absorbs completely whatever the IR spectra is coming at the matter. It is getting absorbed completely and it's not getting detected. Okay, so it means a peak and we do have a baseline. When we are talking about different spectrophotometers, we do have a kind of a reference cell. In the reference cell, normally we keep buffers in which the biomolecules or the different molecules under study are kept. Okay, so it will be basically what we call as the blank correction. So if you're not doing a blank correction, then the spectra will be recorded for the buffers also. So it's always a good idea to have a kind of a reference cell in which you can keep the blanks and do the blank correction before you start your readings. Okay.
So before we move, can you just tell me the significance of the two peaks that we are seeing? Like why there are two peaks? And if you can see in the lower frequency, there is a third peak also, though it is quite broad. So I
This
just
one,
wanted
right?
to, yeah. So I just
Okay,
wanted
yeah.
to know the significance of these peaks. Like what do they denote, and what we are trying to see here? What is our objective of finding these peaks?
Okay, the objective, of course, I'll be coming in the later couple of slides because that's what is about the whole IR spectra, how what you get from the whole the spectrum. Okay, so this peaks the baseline at the top of the page is not very flat. That's a kind of a very normal actually because typically we have to do something kind of a baseline correction, but for a water molecule it's not much easy to do it actually. That's why the peak is going up and down. The major peaks for the water are at the 3200 to the 3600 centimeter inverse. Okay, they are very broad. Of course they are very broad and very strong. The another peak as you mentioned is in the range of 1600, which is relatively very sharp. Okay, and another peak is around the 700 centimeter inverse. So it's going to be like 700 something here. That is also very broad. So the major significance of this particular peaks, I will be talking about when I'm talking when I'm introducing you to the different compounds actually, whether it's going to be a water molecule or is going to be a C double bond O or aldehyde or something like that. How to infer these peaks, we'll be talking in the later couple of slides. Okay.
But in this pure water that we are seeing, this I'm guessing this is pure water. So
Yeah, this is
so does these peaks denote ki like at these peaks the vibration energy is quite high? Do we say
yeah.
like that? Or?
We can say like that actually. Yeah, this comes to your question. The water it observes at this particular spectrum 3200 to 3600. This particular region is called as the functional group region. This region is going to be very important in the IR spectra. Of course you can, this region is called as the fingerprint region, and this region is normally left out as junk region. Okay, so normally you use this particular region to infer the data. So that's why you were asking one question: what is the use of using a DTO, deuterium oxide heavy metal? Okay, it's a kind of
Yes,
isotope
yes,
for
yes.
water. So as you can see here, this water, it absorbs IR heavily. Actually, in fact, it absorbs very beautifully. It absorbs. So most of these biomolecules are in the water molecule. So that's why instead of using water, we use DTO actually to record the IR spectrum. I have included one slide here actually. In fact, uh, let me come to this second slide actually. So
Yeah,
this
sure.
answers your question. So what you are seeing here, this one is a kind of a deuterium oxide. Okay, this particular stretch 3200 to 3600 corresponds to the OH. Okay, so it corresponds to the vibration of this OH, and this 2200, because of the mass of the deuterium is almost like 200 times more than that of the hydrogen. So the peak has been shifted towards the lower wavelength, or we can call it as lower wave number.
So
So
can I
that's,
conclude ki see the OH bond has a higher vibration energy than the OD band.
yeah, that is the conclusion from this slide actually. Yeah, that's true actually. You can
So
conclude.
how would I validate my theory with this data? Like what reasons can I give ki like ki हाँ ki OD का vibration energy would be lesser than the OH vibration energy.
This is quite obvious from this spectra graph, no? That OD's vibration energies are lower than compared with the OH.
No, this is true. But using this data, then I would like hypothesize ki like this is the reason ki OD is ki OD band has less vibration energy than the OH band.
Okay.
Mass of the deuterium, I think.
Now, what's your question, Shreya? Just can you tell it again? So,
See, sir, like we are seeing a trend over here, right? And
yeah.
using this trend, we generate a hypothesis. So I'm asking, ki like what all hypothesis can we like generate from this trend of data? Like, I just wanted to find the reason behind ki like why OD has a higher OD has a lesser vibration energy than the OH.
Okay, yeah, this is basically the effect of mass. The OD actually, the D is almost like 200 percentage more heavier compared to the hydrogen. And if you can see in the previous slide, I was mentioning about this, the mass is going to be inversely proportional to the lambda. So some of the slide actually, which one?
Okay, got it.
You got it now?
Yes.
Like 1 minute. Okay. Yeah, this effect of mass. Increasing the mass of an atom will decrease the frequency at which the bond vibrates. So here in this our case, deuterium is going to be heavier compared to the hydrogen. So it decreases the frequency at which the bond vibrates.
Got it.
The same thing you have to keep it in mind. This effect of tension. Actually, if we increase the bond, if it is going to be C double bond O, will be vibrating at higher frequency compared with the C single bond O. Okay, so I'm giving it an example. Actually, we'll look at a couple of more examples.
Acha, but regarding this, my next question comes to that: how are alpha sheets and unordered
Alpha
second? Yeah.
Yeah. See that, as I was mentioning, this particular stretch is going to be called as a functional group stretch for the IR, and it contributes significantly to the IR spectra. So whatever the influence you get here should be clear from any kind of a noise. Okay, for example, noise here means the spectra coming from the water molecule. I'm not very much interested in understanding the spectra of the water molecule. What I'm interested is understanding the spectra for a biomolecule. In your case, it is going to be alpha helical protein. Alpha
Okay,
helical
now I'm getting
protein,
it. Now I'm getting it.
you are
Because
getting it right.
because if we change the medium to D2O, the vibration energy gap of H2O, which was kind of overlapping between the two, would
Exactly,
disappear.
exactly. You got the point. Yeah, that's why we are using a D2O. We are shifting the peak towards the nonsense region. We are getting rid of the noise from the background. That's all we are doing. Okay. Clear?
Got it, sir.
Great. This picture, this slide effectively shows about the effect of the bond land. As you can see here, see, actually, I just want to tell you one thing. Actually, what I'm trying to cover in the class or in the overall course is going to be a tip of an iceberg. Okay, so if you guys are really interested in this, it's going to be a very interesting field. I highly recommend for those people who are really interested to explore it even more further. Actually, the more you further, because it's going to be a tip of an iceberg. There are lots and lots of things are there. Actually, some people even denote like 5 to 6 years on this IR spectra, UV visible spectra, and different biophysical methods. Actually, so it's a very good thing that you guys are getting excited and interested in this subject. But at the same time, because I won't be able to cover each and every detail of this, I highly recommend those people who are interested into this to dig a little bit deeper. Actually, okay, so it will be even more interesting in that. Actually, so if we have time at the end of the semester, we can have kind of a common discussion groups where we can explore the more recent techniques which have been developed, recent biophysical techniques such as the cryo-electron microscope and all those things. The idea was actually to have a kind of a theoretical course in the morning session and the lab at the afternoon after lunch. But because of the coronavirus, we have to forego the lab, which most probably we are planning to have it in the next semester if everything goes on fine. Okay, so at some point of time, I was thinking about taking you guys to some research institutes where we can actually see how this all these instruments are made use to decode the biological structures and different molecules in the actual research environment. But I don't know how much it will be possible. But at some point of time, I will love to invite some expert people to give and interact with you people. Okay, so that is a plan which I was thinking maybe if time permits, everything goes fine, then we can have something like that. Okay, so anyway, coming back to the topic, this is the effect of the bond strength. As you can see, the frequency in the carbon to carbon bond is in the less than 900. The same thing, it keeps on increasing if the order is increased, like C double bond C, it's in the order of like 1680 to 1620. Okay, the same is true for a C triple bond C actually. And this kind of table is comes in very handy when you are trying to decode the IR spectra. Okay, and the same you can see in the C single bond O, the frequency is very less and it keeps on increasing if you increase the bond. Okay, the same is true for the nitrogen. So the assumption is that as opposed to the chromatography and other spectroscopy methods, the area of the IR band is not directly proportional to the concentration of the functional groups. Okay, so this is a very important valid point. All you can do from the IR spectroscopy is to figure out what different functional groups are present in the molecule. That's it. You cannot get the concentration as you can do it with the UV visible and other different spectroscopy methods. Okay, so this is again a kind of a rephrasing the effect of the bond strength. The depending upon the bond strength. Okay, this is an example of a dipole moment, which is equal to the separator charge and the distance. So if we pull this molecule away from each other, it directly induces the electronegativity difference of. For both the effects, the greater the change in the dipole movement, it gives rise to a greater vibration. If you pull it more, if you pull this molecule more, the vibrational energies will increase, and so that directly corresponds to the increase in peak of the IR spectra. Okay, the second thing is that typically stretching will change the dipole movement more than the bending. This is going to be a statement, so you have to study and understand that if you stretch it, it will change the dipole moment obviously, and it will the dipole moment change will be more than you bend the molecule. So bending is not going to contribute to the IR spectra. Stretching of the molecule is a major factor, major contributing factor to the IR spectra. Okay, the bond strength we have already seen. So let us walk through this. The strong, we can get three different peaks in the IR spectra. Okay, the strong peak is tall and the transmittance is very low, 0 to 35 percentage. Which means that all the molecules are absorbing the IR spectrum, most of the molecules. The medium peak, you can ignore. Okay, the transmittance is of 75 to 35 percentage, and the weak peaks you can ignore completely. There's no need to worry about this weak peak. Okay, and it follows a Gaussian distribution, is abnormally broad. Okay, the exact transmittance, let me have some water. In the case of IR spectroscopy, we measure the exact transmittance of values only. Okay, so what you are seeing here, it's a kind of a very clear graph which gives you the different functional groups which are present in the molecule, which you can use this graph to decode the presence of the different functional groups in the molecule. This region is called as a fingerprint region, which corresponds to the single bond. This particular region, the region colored in pink, you can leave out from your spectra. Okay, so you are more interested in understanding the yellow, green, and blue region. Okay, this particular blue region, it corresponds to the bonds to the hydrogen, and this one is a triple bonder, and this corresponds to the double bonds. You have to remember the frequency, the wave numbers you have to remember. Okay, so this is basically IR spectra of a glucose. Here you can see the forest of peaks around 500 to 1400 centimeter inverse. Okay, so this peak corresponds to total junk area. This is called as these areas you can happily ignore. The 80 percentage of the information you can get it from this particular peak. Okay, so can you tell me how many peaks you can see here in this particular region? Can you tell me, like, how many peaks are visible here? Okay, so the answer is obviously given. Yep. Okay, so I was mentioning like 80 percentage of the useful information it can be obtained by looking at the left side of this particular peak. There you can see kind of a two specific areas of the spectrum. One region. Moni, please. Okay, I'm sorry about that. Yeah, there are two spectrums, 3200 to 3400 centimeter inverse. There's absorption is there. The transmitter is close to around 0.2, and there's another peak. Is basically the slight peak is there around 1650 to 1800, which you can ignore. Okay, so this kind of IR spectrum, when you are given a kind of IR spectrum of an unknown molecule, what you can typically do is that you can have a kind of a graph cheat code, which is available in the second document, IR spectroscopy document 2, which I have shared with you. So you can keep it along with you. It has got a different vibrational frequency for the molecules. Using that, you can decode this particular spectrum. Okay, that is one way of doing it. That is basically called as hunting and pecking. Actually, that's called as hunting and pecking method. But another method is that you can remember the different the vibrational frequencies for the different molecules, this particular region. Okay, so this is a kind of a very beautiful graph, which if you can remember, it will be more than sufficient for you to decode the IR visible spectra graph. Okay, This particular region, 500,000 centimeter inverse, you ignore it. Okay, it's called as a fingerprint region. You can ignore it happily. And this particular region, 1650 to 1800, is corresponds to the C double bond O stretch. Okay, and that is followed by this C triple N and C triple bonded C of 2100 to 2260 centimeter inverse. Okay, this rarely occurs in the case of biomolecules. So you will be more concerned about this particular stretch, the region between 3200 to 3100 region. Okay, this particular stretch corresponds to the CH stretch. Okay, and there is another way to decode that. Actually, you have to remember all these particular the regions and all. Actually, that's fine if you can remember the C single bonded hydrogen and double bonded. If you understand, then that is more than sufficient for you. Okay, interpreting the spectra is slightly complicated, but if you can make it, if you can divide the observed data into different groups. For example, here what I have been trying to do is that the spectra what you have observed here looks like a tongue. Okay, that corresponds to the OH. It's not very clear, it's slightly broadened and expanded one. If you get a spectra which is going to be very sharp, that corresponds to the C double bond O carbonyl group. Okay, so in this particular example what you are looking at the slide here, the example 1 2 3 4 and 5, you can see it is going to be it's kind of a broadened up. And here at the sixth example, you can see there's a tiny peak is there, but it doesn't correspond to anything. Okay, you can ignore that, and it doesn't correspond to the OH stretch. Okay, so the coming to the C double bond O stretch. Uh, okay, so here I had included this aldehydes, ketones, esters, and carboxylic acids. So all these molecules have C double bond O functional group. So you can make use of this functional frequencies and the shape of the spectra to differentiate all this different C double bond O stretch. Okay. So the idea is if you are getting a kind of a broader peak, you can blindly say it is going to be OH hydroxyl group, and if it is going to be sharp, then you can say it is going to be the C double bond O stretch. The signal is because of the C double bond O stretch. Okay. So here the line at 3000 centimeter inverse is a kind of a very useful border between the alkene CH, which is above the 3000. Okay, I'm talking about this particular one, and alkane CH, which is below the 3000. So you can use it this border to have a kind of a demarcation between alkenes and alkanes. Alkenes will have a kind of absorption peak, or we can call it a transmission peak around 3000 centimeter inverse. Okay, if it is going to be below 3000, you can name it as going because of the alkane. The region around 2200 is indicator of the presence of a triple bond. Triple bonds rarely occur in the biological system, so it's not of our concern. We are more concerned about this C double bond O and this particular region. So now you have a kind of a better picture. If someone gives you the molecular formula and that will you and the spectra, the IR spectra, then I assume that you will be able to decode what kind of a bond is present in the IR spectra. Okay. So another thing I want to introduce here is a factor which is called as a degree of unsaturation. So I hope that was covered in the chemistry class. Degrees of unsaturation. Have you covered? Have it been covered?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
On first year.
what is that? Obviously, that was going to be my second question.
So I guess the amount of unsaturated upon saturated, it's probably is a ratio. So I think we'll use the alkyl CH. The number. Achha.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, tell me. Okay, so anyway, you can basically use it to calculate the hydrogens which are present. For example, okay, the number of hydrogen the atoms is equal to 2 into number of carbon atoms plus 2. Okay, so is it clear? The number of carbons. Okay, see, I will give you an example here.
No, sir.
Okay, yeah, this internet is giving me pain. Okay, sorry. Okay, I'm really sorry about this. Okay, fine. So I assume my screen is visible. Okay, so in the screen you can see the degrees of unsaturation, which is a kind of a very simple formula, but it is a kind of a very useful one when you're trying to understand what is the role of hydrogen in a molecule. Okay, if you can see here, the number of hydrogens is equal to 2 into the number of carbons plus 2. Okay, so using this you can calculate whether the molecule has a double bond or is going to have a triple bond or anything like that. The formula for degree of unsaturation is 2C plus 2 plus N minus H minus X by 2. Okay, and this we are not going to use it as of now, so you can ignore it for the time being. There's nothing wrong in knowing it. This is what I want you guys to remember. The number of hydrogen is equal to 2 into the number of carbons plus 2. Okay. Do you have time? Okay, so let us go to this small practice questions. Can you give a try with this actually? Can you try this one? We have a molecular formula C4H8O2, and depending upon this spectra, can you guys tell me it corresponds to which particular molecule present here? Okay, the formula is C4H8O2. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So guys, just give a try with this one, or if you are too tired for today's class, then we can call it a day. I will give this assignment to you. We can meet maybe next week, or I will try to record the rest of the lectures and try to post it. Okay. So you want to give a try? You want to proceed further with the class?
B or D, I guess.
Okay,
Sir,
can it?
B. B.
B
B.
should be done.
B.
B or D?
B.
I think D is much more has a much more fit than B, but B or D could be the answer.
See, actually, there is no approximation in this kind of instruments. So either you have to be very clear, because when you are trying to design a drug molecule, we cannot say it is going to be B or D. You have to be very precise.
Yes,
Yeah, you got it right. So you are saying it is going to be B or D.
D more probability, like mostly D.
Can you explain why?
So because see in this thing after 3000 we can see a broad peak. So I'm guessing there should be an OH group, and also we can see at 17,000, like between 18 to 17,000 we can see a sword. So that could be the C double bond O. So using that thing, I think D should be the answer.
Which one? D.
D.